welcome back to the ThinkerNick podcast. It is a lovely Saturday morning, afternoon for me, morning for Nicola. It is the 11th of December. Nicola, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
That's good. So in today's episode, we are going to be talking about understanding risks. And first, we need to understand what a risk is. And my interpretation of a risk would be when you need to make a decision and that decision can lead to some sort of loss or harm. And you need to understand exactly what that could be. So that would be the risk that you would be taking when making that decision. Nicola, what is a risk in your context?
Yeah, I mean, I think the definition is great. I think what definitions sometimes do is they skew other windows. So risks are definitely about potential harm that could be caused from an event and activity. And that could be harm to a human and also to a capital, finances. And there's also another sort of scoping attached, I think, to risk, which is around opportunity. So it's like if you're an entrepreneur, you're not necessarily going to hurt anybody, or there's no life-threatening risk attached to those decisions. There is the potential loss of capital if you're putting capital in, but then there are other kinds of risks attached to opportunities, which are harder to measure sometimes.
Yeah, so let's actually look at that. So let's look at assessing risks. So obviously everybody takes risks on a day-to-day basis. Like you said, whether they are financial, it could even just be a risk. For example, like jumping on a flight and taking an airplane to go on holiday. I mean, it's an everyday, not an everyday, but it's a risk that someone would face in everyday life, not just in business. So let's look at assessing risks. What are the sort of questions you should be asking yourself when assessing a risk?
That's a good one. Let's go back before you start asking the questions, and let's look at the things that we do where we don't assess risk, the things we take for granted.
Okay.
So what I think happens is over time, our thinking and decision-making is informed by experience and assumption. So if you've got a car, or I think in Vietnam, you've probably got a scooter or a motorbike.
Yeah, motorbike, both.
So what happens is, and you've got to get from home to work every day. So your experience and assumption is that the bike will get you where you want to go. So you jump up, you get dressed, you're in a hurry, maybe you're a little bit late, you jump in your car or you jump on your motorbike or your scooter, and you go from A to B. So over time, your experience of that repetitive event creates a level of assurance in your decision-making process. Because if it never lets you down, you never have the question, will my scooter or my car get me from A to B? So there's a lot of things we do in life which still have inherent risks attached to them, but we don't think of the risks on a day-to-day basis because our experience builds a foundation of assumption, and those assumptions say, my scooter will get me there.
So that's why, like, when you want to throw money into an investment or something, that's when you'll be like, hang on a minute, because this is not an everyday thing that you're used to doing. It's like, there's quite a lot of risk in that.
Yeah. So that's the one type of decision making that we have. But now enter another day and it's pouring with rain. There's a lot of traffic on the road, or your scooter breaks down, or my car breaks down. So once that event has happened, you now begin to question your assumption, because now getting in the vehicle or getting on the bike poses a risk.
Yeah.
And the risk in that circumstance is I might break down in the rain. That's a difficult situation. The risk is I might not get there on time. The risk is I might have an accident because of the bad weather. So suddenly, when an event happens that challenges or questions our assumptions, it suddenly then gets posed as a risk, even though it's an everyday event. So that's one category. Then there's another category, and there's like the category of personal harm.
Yeah.
So
what's the worst case scenario? What can harm us today?
Well, Yeah, but the worst case scenario in a business or in life for most people is death, the
Oh
fear
yeah,
of
for
death.
sure, for sure. Yeah,
So if you're doing something and you're poop scared of dying, the chances are you won't do it, because the instinct to protect life, the instinct for survival is so great that it's like, woof, I'm not doing that. But then there's that sort of category of people called adrenaline junkies who will sort of base jump off a building. I mean, I can't get my head around that. I can barely
yeah,
stand
yeah.
on the top of a chair.
Yeah, I
And
remember
these
going.
guys are like,
I remember Plettenberg Bay. They have that the longest
oh,
bungee jump in the
yes.
world,
Yeah, yeah.
and I remember going there with my best mate, and him and his younger sister didn't even hesitate. I sat in that like watchroom for 2 hours waiting for them to get their turn, and I was like, "There's no chance that I'm
Yeah.
doing that." You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah. I had a client once want to push me off a bridge somewhere in Zimbabwe. And I have a business partner who did push me out of an airplane attached to a
Oh my,
stranger.
really?
Yeah, I did do that.
That's something that I really want to do, but also again, like,
Yo.
people would say it's risky, which is,
It's very
it's
risky.
very risky. Yeah. Anyways,
But
so
then it's not, because there's so many examples of people having done it successfully, and the number of times that injury or loss has occurred, comparatively, it becomes a low risk. But in a heightened sense of self-preservation, even if it is a low risk statistically, you're unlikely to take the risk
yeah,
because of fear.
yeah. Okay. So let's sort of shift the focus towards businesses here.
Okay.
What is the biggest risks that businesses face today?
Well, I'm not an expert in risk, but I hear about it. So
Okay.
I'm only going to give you the context of what I hear, not
Okay.
my experience. So in business, I think of risk in three areas. There's risk management, there's risk appetite, and there's risk tolerance. So think of an acronym, MAT. You know, when you take a risk, think of your MAT.
Matt. Okay.
So, or you could do it the other way around, TAM, but MAT is easy to remember. So risk management is, in my view, the proactive process or ability of an organization to minimize or mitigate risk. So that could be working on a mining operation, and you've got lots of risks inherent in there, a process, a factory, a bottling plant, all sorts of different things. But what are all the things that might go wrong? And let's put something in place to mitigate that. So even if the risk occurs, you either know what to do to stop it before it becomes a big problem, or you try and do preventative risk to make
Yeah.
sure that the risk never occurs. So that's sort of risk management, and it's extremely important, particularly for industrial type
Yeah.
organizations.
Health and safety and stuff like that as well.
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive. Lots of industries have got a philosophy, what they call zero harm. So, and that's sort of in health and safety. But there's also capital risks. So let's say you've got R1 billion
Yeah.
in cash. What do you do with your cash? Let's say you're running a hedge fund for pension funds. What do you do with that money?
Yeah, for
So
sure. They've
there's
really got to
massive
manage
risks.
that.
Yeah. Imagine
Yeah.
if you put it all into McDonald's and then it tanked.
Oh my, and then you go
You
into
know,
debt,
oof.
which
Well,
is what we just spoke about in the last episode. Go check it out. Yeah.
yeah. No, you carry on.
I'm just really interested in what I mean. I'm really interested in what risk appetite is. I have no idea. I'm just trying to think of what it could be.
So management is about always think of management as control. That's
Yeah, for sure.
fundamentally what to what extent can you control your risks? Appetite. Now, this is interesting because we've had a lot of conversations about you being an entrepreneur and things like that. So appetite is almost how much are you willing to risk for what type of gain? It's almost like a ratio.
Risk reward.
Risk, there you go. Risk
Risk reward.
reward.
Yeah.
So to give you an example, And many people have heard me say that in my circle. A number of years ago, we had an opportunity to run an event with a very well-known speaker, Tom Peters. And Tom, I'm sure he still is, but in those days was a fairly high-paid international speaker. And what we had to do was put him on an airplane from Boston, fly him to South Africa, market a one-day event, and fly him home safely. So the risks inherent in that were, what happens if Tom doesn't come to the event? So you can take insurance for that risk.
Okay.
What happens if we market the event and Tom gets sick? So he comes safely, but he can't stand up and speak. So you can insure for that. You can insure for your revenue and your costs. I think you can insure for costs. I'm not sure about revenue.
But who's paying you out? The insurance company, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. So you can insure against cancellation of random events that might occur in pursuit of you running an event. Because actually, if you think about it, you've got all your marketing costs, all your revenue attached to those costs, and then you've got the risk of having one person for one day in one room, getting on an airplane in another country.
It's high risk.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't have the appetite for single speaker events, and also are not always willing to risk the capital involved to secure the speaker to run the event. So we did. And when I say we, it was we and my team at the time.
I think management is so important there as well. Risk management is so important there as well, especially when it comes to money. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. So the way we describe it, I said you basically put R1 million or $1 million, and you put it all on red. Imagine you're in the casino.
Yeah.
And you're putting it all on exactly.
Yeah.
So you put it all on red, but it's actually even one number. You put it all on 7.
Yeah.
And then you spin the wheel of commerce, and you hope it lands on 7. So we did actually have a very successful event with Tom, but it's a very high risk thing to do because you don't know if you can market it. You don't know if you can get enough people to come to cover your costs. You don't know. There are lots and lots of don't knows. But what's interesting, so that's a high risk appetite in our industry.
Yeah.
But it's also creates almost like an adrenaline rush. You get so motivated because you don't want it to fail, management, that you work like crazy to make sure it's a success.
And then the last one?
Tolerance.
Risk tolerance.
Tolerance, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't there a song? Some hope and tolerance.
Is that your tolerance to be able to take risks?
It's
your tolerance to handle risks? What is risk tolerance?
I think tolerance is more personal. In an organization, it would possibly be attached to culture. So when you start to look at risk appetite and risk tolerance are probably quite similar, but risk tolerance is how long can you sustain that for? So somebody might go to a casino with a high appetite on risk, but it's not something that's repetitive. It's the duration. The endurance part of risk is your tolerance level. So we could say, let's put some money into Forex and gamble a bit, but your tolerance for Forex is low. So after a while, you get out of foreign exchange.
Yeah.
In a company, what you tolerate often defines the culture. So if you tolerate non-performance, or if you tolerate people making mistakes and don't do anything about it, it'll impact almost always your culture. So if you think of personal culture, it's a very personal thing. Your tolerance level and my tolerance level could be completely different, even though our appetites are quite similar.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you want to put R1 million on 7 and make a couple of million? And you'll be like, yeah. It's like, well, now let's talk about your now let's talk about your tolerance. It's like, well, we could lose it. What about inflation? What if this happens? What if the dollar tanks?
Yeah. So for everyday life, when people are making these decisions and taking risks, The first thing you'll say to someone is just think about what you're going to do, but some people don't have that ability to assess. They don't have that ability. And I've witnessed this with friends, and I've witnessed this with lots of people. They don't think about the consequences. They just act. So is there like sort of a framework or a model that people could like go through and assess, like say I have, there's a risk I need to assess. Is there a framework or something that people could, they put that situation into the framework, assess the risk, and maybe manage it that way? Do you know of anything like that?
Yeah, I've always, I'm deeply trained in de Bono methodology, so it's hard for me to separate some of Edward de Bono's thinking from my own. Edward wrote a curriculum for schools called CORT, Cognitive Research Trust. It was an acronym. And he also wrote a program for business called Power of Perception Today. At one point, it was called Direct Attention Thinking Tools. But two tools that he references, one is called a PMI, and one is called consequences and sequals. Now, a PMI basically stands for plus minus interesting. So what you would do is you would say, here's my risk, or here's my decision. What are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the interesting outcomes of taking this decision? And I've got a friend who we once trained in lateral thinking, to train lateral thinking. And she introduced in her business that nobody in her company ever comes to her with a problem having not first done a PMI, plus minus interesting.
Okay.
So it's a very simple, powerful framework, because it's slightly different to a pro and a con, because pros and cons tends to have your mind generate a thought, and then you decide which category it fits in. Oh, that's a pro, that's a con, no, that's a con, no, that's a pro. What you're supposed to do with a PMI is do it in a very deliberate fashion. You put effort into each category one at a time. And you might not remember this, but I remember we did this with you when you were about 7.
Was I like a little test dummy for you? You've done 6 thinking hats. You've done PMI. I'm sure there's plenty more that are going to come out in the podcast.
We did a PMI at the dining room table. I was house sitting / babysitting. Your parents had gone on holiday, and it was, in fact, you enjoyed it so much that I could get you to clear the table as children and come back to the table to do the PMI. So you know how hard it is to get kids to sit still.
Yeah.
So we all cleaned the table, then we'd all come back to the table and sit around the table and do that. And kids actually love it, because it's like, what's great about your day? What was bad about your day? And if you had today differently, what would you do?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's one tool. Yeah.
So we do that at the end of lessons.
Great.
It's like a known as a plenary. So yeah, we do this after our lessons. It's called the KWL chart. It's basically what you know, what you want to know, and what you learned.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not the exact same framework, but it's kind of similar, and that's, you know what I mean. It's similar in that sense. Yeah. So that's quite interesting. I could maybe incorporate something like that. Maybe get my kids to sit still in the classroom. Sure. Use it. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
So that's the one tool. There's another tool which is perhaps better for risk, because in some ways that PMI might be slightly emotive unless you had a thinking partner. The other one is what he called consequences and sequals. And basically what you try and do here is you try and evaluate the time frames. And you could actually combine them and do a plus minus interesting and a consequences and sequels. So what are the benefits in the short, medium, and long term? What are the risks in the short, medium, and long term? What are the opportunities in the short, medium, and long term? So now you've sort of got a 3x3 matrix. And there's a shed load of questions you can ask. If you jump online and you say, what questions do I ask about risk? The list will be endless. What might go wrong?
Yeah.
Who might get hurt? You start to look at it from stakeholder points of view.
Yeah. What can we lose? Stuff like that.
The challenge with risk when it comes to entrepreneurship is most entrepreneurs, if they did a huge amount of risk management at the beginning, their appetite would go away. They would no longer be hungry. But if you've put R1 million on 7 and you didn't necessarily consider all the risks, you might figure them out backwards. So you become very good at risk management in the process of execution. What a big corporation has to do is do risk management almost before they start implementing. But entrepreneurs tend to do it in the rearview mirror.
That
It's
sounds
like,
that
geez,
sounds
never thought about that.
that
How are we
sounds
going to
like
solve that?
yeah, that sounds like going in blind. Do you know what I mean? It sounds like learning on the job. What's the difference?
I think
Sorry.
it's both. No, it's
Okay.
fine. I think it's both. If you're constantly looking at your risks, you make much slower decisions. And that's not to say that's a bad thing, but in a time where execution and time are the commodity, that's the commodity today. How quickly can you implement something and manage your risks? So in the one way, you can sit here and I can say, right, I'm going to design a new pen. And I sit here for hours trying to figure out what's wrong with it. Where's the lid? How can this go dry? Will it write? Will it run out of ink? Can I hold it? Massive evaluation. And I go, yeah, no, I've got the perfect pen. I go to market and then someone's come out with a better pen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, damn it. I put in all that effort and someone's already got a better pen. So there is no new idea. If you've had an idea, guaranteed someone else has.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, you can do that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it's a slower form of risk taking.
Yeah.
The other form is, a little crazy jump in blind. Not many people do that, although I'm not saying they don't exist. But there's another approach, which is particularly in software development, which is called AGILE. And if you look at things like the lean startup, what they do there is they have a concept called launch and learn. So you do a piece of work, you figure out what works and what doesn't, you do the next piece of work. So you do it incrementally. So I've got a mantra at the moment, I'm just going to say picked up a couple of kilograms over the last while. So
haven't we all? It's the festive season. It's the festive season.
Well, no, it's like the festive season is coming. So this is like the legacy of several festive seasons.
Okay.
So it was incrementally gained, right? It was incrementally gained. I didn't become round overnight. So it's almost the same thing. It's like incremental gains.
Yeah. But so working backwards. That's
well, now I'm working backwards. Yeah. But
I mean in the context of what you were saying jump in blind, work backwards, or learn backwards, kind of. That's what you were saying, right?
Well, so
we have a framework in teaching called understanding by design, and it's basically you'll plan your summative assessment, which is the end goal, and you work back. Does that have any any relevance to what you're saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Now, what I've learned about working with people in businesses is the more time you spend getting people's mind around the destination, what does it look like when it's fixed? What does it look like when you've got what you want? And it could be a 12-month goal. It could be a 3-year goal. It could be a 5-year strategy. But the more time you spend helping people articulate the future, the easier it is for them to move towards it.
For sure.
And when you do that, it's never to say there are not risks. That's where risk management comes in.
Yeah.
But people's tolerance for risk is higher when they have anticipated what that risk might be.
Yeah. It's like learning, for example. You can parrot learn something. Like I remember doing this in school. Like you can just recite definitions and they come from your head. And I don't know how you do that. It's just the knowledge in there. But if I wanted to learn a definition, I would have to parrot learn it. And I remember, especially in economics, I parrot learned the whole curriculum. And then I would go and take my assessment. I got like a C or whatever. But as soon in my other subjects like math, as soon as I understood it, it's a whole different ballgame. I could not only do it with my eyes closed, but I could build on that as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's relevant to what you're saying. So Nicola, I'm going to end off with one final question.
Okay.
And you might have to think about this one, or maybe it'll come straight to your mind. But what do you think is the biggest risk you've ever taken?
So there's emotional risk, There's
Okay.
physical risk and there's economic risk.
Yeah.
Okay. So emotional risk is
The
almost always attached to the fear of rejection.
Okay.
So
So I was
that would,
referring to you
yeah.
actually.
So I've
Okay.
taken a few big emotional risks.
Okay.
Some of them have resulted in rejection.
I think we've all been there. We've all been there.
The financial risks, or the physical risks, unquestionably jumping out that aeroplane.
Yeah, for sure.
That was particularly because I'm not really afraid of too many physical things in the environment, but heights.
Yeah.
I'm not good with heights.
It's not the height for me. Well, it probably would be when I would be up there in the plane, but it's the fact that there is still that possibility that the parachute's not going to come out and somebody else is in control. Like, I don't like that. That just doesn't sit
there
well
you
with
go.
me. Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast, control.
Yeah, literally control. Yeah, I'd say mine would be just moving to Vietnam with nothing. That would have probably been my biggest stress so far.
Actually, now you say it. Yeah, I've done a few crazy things.
I mean, do you want them aired? Are these going on air?
Yeah, I'll share one.
Okay,
because,
go for it.
And then I'll reflect on it, and then maybe we should call it a day. But
yeah,
I was in my 20s, and I'd left South Africa, gone back to England, and I'd gone to the US to work with my then mentor in the States, in Chicago. And as it was around, there was a war on in Israel and Tel Aviv. It was the Iraqi war. That was it. In those days, I couldn't get a visa to stay in America. So I had to go back to England. So 2 days before I was about to leave, I got a phone call from someone in the West Indies who had been to South Africa as a speaker, heard that I was in America, knew I was going back to England, and wanted somebody to come and work for them. So she found me in America. So she'd gone from the West Indies to South Africa, presented at a conference, heard about me, knew I was in America. So she phoned me and said, don't go back to England, come and work for me. So
what?
I have no job. Yeah, true story. I have no job. I have no money. I'm living in America. I have a suitcase of winter clothes because I'd been in Chicago in winter, and she lived on an island in the West Indies. So I literally, without an interview, without having met this woman, there was no Zoom, no internet, nothing. Yeah. It was a phone call. I jumped on a plane and I flew to the West Indies.
And is that
had a great time?
You regret? No, clearly not.
No.
And I think you were speaking about your 25th birthday in one of the podcasts prior to this, and you said you were on an island somewhere.
That's it. That's where I was.
There was okay.
Yeah.
It all makes
on
sense.
An island.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a story, hey? Well, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation on risk. I've learned a hell of a lot, and I've had a lot of fun. So, Nicola, thank you very much again for your time. For those listeners, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, give us a share. And like I said, and I always say, comment. We would love to know what you guys think, and we'd love to talk about things that you guys would be interested for us to talk about. Cool. So, Nicola, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers, Nick. Okay, bye.
For more news and content about ThinkerNick, go to www.thinkernick.com or visit our Facebook or Instagram pages @ThinkerNick.